gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
What's up, guys? What is up? Welcome back to Deck Talk Podcast. I am Colin Burnett, and this is my good buddy Norman Lee.
What's up, guys, everybody, all our fishing friends.
And boy, Norman, we have got a show for people today, don't we?
You know what? We sure do, man. We have a fella coming on today as our guest. Of course, you can probably already see him up there. But Mr. John Pate, you know what? And me and John Pate go a long way back. So very good, close friend of mine, king of the Everglades. John Pate, how are you doing, my man? How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, Norman. Thanks for inviting me on, Colin. You guys, appreciate it very much.
Yes, sir, man. You know, we have a lot to, we have so much that we could actually discuss, with my man John. We'd actually have to have 10 episodes to fit everything in, and we got about an hour to do it in. So, but John, man, how's the weather? First of all, I just got back from Florida a couple weeks ago, and it was hot, hot, hot. It was like in the 90s every day I was there. So, what's the weather like down there now? Has it dropped in temperature a little bit since I was there, or is it still baking?
Well, right now, this morning, it was about 50 degrees.
Oh,
Now it's
so
about
it's only got a little
60.
colder from when I was there then, because I don't think I seen 50 degrees the whole time I was there. It was like even at nighttime, it was like in the 80s.
I think it's about 67 degrees now, but the wind's
Yeah.
blowing a little bit. You know how it gets down here. But I know it's
Yeah, well, I don't
colder
know
up
what the
there.
temperature is up here in Tennessee, but all I know is I walk outside, my ears frost over, and I walk back inside. I don't want nothing to do with that cold weather. I hate it. But John, man, we got some pretty cool stuff to talk about today. Um, One of the questions I want to talk to you about is as a kid growing up in the sport of fishing. How did you get your start as a kid growing up in South Florida, wanting to fish tournaments, wanting to get the inspiration to fish tournaments, and later on as a guide, and quite frankly, one of the, if not the best guide fishing the Everglades at the time.
Well, I'm retired now, but we'll go back to the beginning. You know, all of us at this age, when you started out, was either with your father or friends around the neighborhood or your grandfather. So I was lucky to have both, grandfather and dad, and an uncle and two that took me fishing. But most of the time, it was, I know some of the older fellas will remember this. They will take you fishing, as they used to tell me, I'll take you fishing, but you're going to sit back there and not say anything. You're going to watch. You're going to do what we tell you to do, how we tell you to do it. If you're not, I'm going to take the pole from you. And that's where I started to learn how to fish. Most of the times it was make peanut butter and jelly sandwich for granddad and dad, you know. And my first pole was a cane pole. You all know that.
Yep.
First fish I ever caught was a monster mudfish. Scared to death of it, too.
That was the biggest bass of your life till you seen it.
Oh, I didn't know what it was. I come running home with that big old thing on a rope, thinking I caught the world's biggest bass in the world. Dad told me to go bury that thing in the yard. But,
Yeah.
you know, all in all, growing up as a kid in South Florida, we were very, very lucky because we had 24-hour weather, pretty much year-round the way you see it. And we could go to any body of water, any canal, and catch big fish. They were everywhere. It was a wonderful time growing up down here. It's still a wonderful place. The The fishing's wonderful. We got great fishing down here of all varieties and different kinds. And it's, an adventure when you come to Florida. But as a young kid growing up, it was easier, less traffic, less people,
Yeah.
less pressure.
Right.
So yeah, the older fellas did catch more fish that were bigger back then than we do today because of the boat pressures we have and the more pressures of all the anglers are now top-notch anglers. Half the field out there know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Thank God we
And
went
that's the
into
one.
catch and
I was gonna say
release.
that's the one thing I notice a lot about today versus kind of course. You came up a lot before when I did, but not only the pressure you have, but today there's more knowledgeable anglers or fishermen than there.
Oh,
The skill level of even the younger kids growing up today, coming up in the sport, the skill level is a lot higher today than it was back then. So you don't only have more pressure today, more people actually doing it, more people hitting the lake, more people fishing, but you have a better skill level with on average of the anglers you're going to have on the water today. You have a better skill level. So it's not only the pressure of more people doing it, but you have more knowledge on the water as well. So there's more people that actually know a little bit more about what they're doing and how to target fish as well today than you did back then.
yeah. The biggest trick that I learned through the older men when I was a kid growing up was the main factor that taught those men how to fish, which we have a little different things today with electronics than what they did back then. But their biggest secret to me was to teach me how to judge the hatch that was in the body of water that I was fishing, what my temperatures of the water were. Even back then, they worried about if the water was colder or hotter. Of course, we had different weeds back then than what we have today. But all in all, it was learning to read the system. And when you're a young kid growing up and, learning this from these older fellas and seeing it, I mean, it comes to a no-gainer, no-brainer, the fact that you're going to either love the fishing because you've learned how to do it. It's okay just to go fishing, but if you want to make this a career job or become a guide, start fishing tournaments, you're going to have to learn how to read what the fish are giving you each and every day because it shifts. Florida's the hardest state to fish in, especially with weather changes. It can go sour in a heartbeat,
Yeah.
1 minute to the next.
And you
But
kind of when you hit the water, and you're actually trying to find fish. And me as a guide now, of course, you being a guide down in the Everglades, and I guess you used to guide on Okeechobee as well, a couple of different bodies of water besides the Glades. But us as guides, when we're out trying to find fish for upcoming trips, we're actually having to try to pattern our fish and try to kind of think in our minds where the fish are going. You can do so much fishing in the moment, but the moment of you finding them that particular day might not be where they're going to be 2 days, 3 days from now. So you kind of got to think about and start fishing and practicing where the fish are going to be when you're going to need to catch them versus how you're catching them that day. So yeah, and it kind of falls into a lot of the way you practice for tournaments as well. You want to kind of practice where they're going, not where they are when you're actually fishing.
right. It's,
We
staying
got
upon what you guys do. Go ahead.
we well we got uh, ZK Custom, which is Zach.
What's up, Zach?
John, he's from around here. He's a hoss on Nick and Jack that we have that we fish up here. He just says what's up, Norman, and Colin. He said that he's working. So yeah, we know I've got to. We're doing it at 3 because I've actually got to get up, take a nap, and get ready to go to work here later on this evening.
Yeah.
So, but also if you're on Facebook, we need y'all to hit that like button and to share it, so we can if you share it to where we can get it out to more, the more likes and the more shares that we get, the more people that we're going to be able to reach. And so, and John, Zach says, "What's up?" So, but and then with our the YouTube channel, we want everybody to go to Deck Talk Podcast YouTube channel and like and subscribe to it.
Yep.
Because again, eventually, like Norman said here, the past couple of podcasts, we are going to eventually just be. We won't be going live on our Facebooks or Norman's or myself's YouTube channel. So right now we're just trying to grow. Eventually we're going to be strictly just the Deck Talk podcast. So and we got Scott Walker. John Scott Walker is a buddy of ours that he's actually from Maryland, and so he's a custom bait maker in Maryland. So he, you know, y'all are already going through spawn and stuff down there. Y'all might be already at the tail end of it. Well, he's probably got about another month and a half before he even starts seeing the first glimpse of it. And so,
Yeah, there's still spawning down here too. There's a lot coming off of them, but it's with this other cold front coming through. The late skies will go on now, but it's winding down a little bit. But now going out in the Everglades is a lot different in fishing down south than it is up there where you boys live, because a lot of our waters are very shallow.
yeah,
It's a total different body of water down here, and a lot of guys learn that when they come here, and then they have to realize that a lot of it you have to learn how to flip, and that was another thing a lot of people didn't understand. Down here we flip. We did a
yeah,
lot of flipping. We still do a lot of stuff. We do a lot of big snakes, a lot of big worms, a lot of swim baits, and designing baits and making molds at home is a pretty cool thing to do. Actually, you can save the local fisherman that doesn't have the pocket to be able to make his own molds off of what favorite bait he wants to use and pour them at home. You can't sell them because it
right.
belongs to somebody else, but you can make a mold of it and save yourself some money. And Norman knows that for a fact. That's been a big deal in my life growing up, was to start to pour plastics and invent things to try to see what the fish have never seen before.
Yeah.
Something
Is that a
simple.
part of fishing that you enjoy doing? Is
Oh,
'cause I know
absolutely.
like we make jigs and stuff like that, and just the satisfaction of being able one to make your own baits, but then the satisfaction of when you actually hook. Like for us, like my dad was using our jigs, and he caught a 4.5 5 pound smallmouth on our jigs, and just the satisfaction of catching a big fish or even just a fish period, on our baits is was very satisfying.
Yeah.
Yes,
It
it is.
actually it gives you a little bit of like Colin says, satisfaction and kind of a reward back to you, knowing that that fish came off of a bait that we actually made.
Yeah, the thing with myself was it was so much more self-gratifying to be able to pour a bait, make it your color, make it the way you want it to be, and go out and win tournament after tournament after tournament after tournament. That's when it
Yeah,
starts to be fun, because now you've made a product that nobody else has got, and you're
yeah,
owning it yourself,
Yeah.
and you're
yeah.
winning every time.
And John, we've got a couple questions already.
Yes, sir.
Travis Tritzler says that he's been finding them up real shallow, catching them on a frog on Escapoga has been on fire. Um, and then Zach asked John, what is your go-to specific line hook on most of you and weights size for flipping?
Well, there's a universal question there. You got a lot of guys that prefer either to go 65-pound braid, 5/0 hooks, big 2-ounce tungstens, 1-ounce tungstens. Then you got the other guys who believe going a little smaller because of the heat. Sometimes you got to finesse bait, so you got to call there on yourself. You got to judge what is best for yourself and how thick the weeds are to punch through.
Yeah. And it
Sometimes,
also depends too on a lot of the guys in South Florida. First thing you think of when you're flipping is, especially down in South Florida, 65 pound braid. But a lot of the guys, including myself, from time to time, I'll go away from the braid and flip like a 17 or 20 pound mono. So
yes,
it kind
sir.
of depends there on if you're using braid or mono too. Typically, with your braid, you're going to use those what they call superline hooks, which is a beefier hook. So the hook doesn't
Yeah,
straighten out because the braid no stretch factor. But
it's true.
the type of line use makes a difference too on what hook you decide to use.
There's a lot of times I've had boys get on my boat when I'm guiding, and they'll look at the lines that are on my boat, and sometimes they'll look in the rod box and say, "Boy, look at all the braid you got in there." But on the deck, we're fishing with mono and only one rod with braid. And I have to tell them, the braid runs from 20 to 30, 40 to 65 when I'm using it. And I said, but don't forget, mono was around before
Yeah.
the braided lines became
Way
very
before
famous.
braid, yeah.
Yeah.
We did have a line that was called nylon. They were used for trout lines, turtle lines, all sorts of stuff. Now that was really your first style of that type of line. We still
Right.
use mono. And mono, we're lucky down here that we get to use thicker line because we have a lot of brush. We got a lot
Yeah.
of cutting materials such as sawgrass, certain rocks or coral rocks. They can scratch up against things, and people have to remember, before we started using braid, we were winning with mono just as much. But the braid
Yeah.
put a whole new confidence level in the tournament angler and the local angler that they felt they weren't going to break off as much. And it's
Yeah.
true. It's far more a powerful line. It's a line that you have to learn how to respect and use it properly. And please don't throw it in the water. It does
Yeah.
damage, or unit damage, everything. I mean, even the guides, I beg, when the guides are fishing, please, when your customer breaks off on braid, please recover it. Don't leave
Yeah.
it stretched across the lily pads for 20 yards. In local
Exactly.
thing, we have to clean up our own waterways, because if we don't, the state's not going to.
Yeah.
It's not in their
And
budget.
to that point right there, John, that's one thing I know me and Colin see a lot, is we're all, you all, there's not many days we don't hit the lake where we don't pick up line on either the end of our own line once we make a cast, or, but I will, to John's point about line, one thing I do as an angler, and typically I'm on the water 4 or 5 days a week in a lot of cases. So I'm out there a lot, but pretty much at least once a week, I always, and it's a good point for everybody out there to think about possibly doing if you're on the water enough. Um, and if you're only on the water every weekend or whatever, you still want to do it every couple weeks, every 3 weeks. I personally do it once a week. Is pull your trolling motor prop off, and typically every time you pull your trolling motor prop off, there's not many days that I pull my trolling motor prop off that I don't have line wound around the prop. And the problem with braid, getting back to like your braided line, braided line does not give. Once it wraps the prop, it continues wrapping, and it gets tighter and tighter, and it'll get tighter and tighter as the prop spins. And what it'll do, your trolling motors will eventually blow out the seal in your trolling motor, and then you'll have big issues once the seal's gone in your trolling motor, all due to the tightening factor of the braid. But not only that, but your prop as well. You
Yeah.
always want to pull your prop. Uh, and again, I pull mine once a week and check my prop on my big motor. And there's not many times I don't pull the prop that I don't have line wound inside the hub of that prop. And if you don't check it frequently, now a lot of times when you got mono on there, it's not as big a deal, but it can be. But with braid, where you don't have that stretch, it won't break. If it wraps too tight, it'll continue wrapping, and it'll blow out a prop seal, uh, or a prop shaft seal on your motor, and then you have bigger issues down the road. So that
Yep.
and that's a good habit to get into. Um, is to make sure you pull your trolling motor
Right.
prop and your up on your big motor time to time, just to
The
double check
main,
that.
your other main issue about that on your trolling motor is the other thing to think about, which I've learned, is when you get a big buildup of line like that on your prop and you're not paying attention, it wears down the time capacity on your batteries. It's
Right.
forcing the motor to work harder, it's heating up, it's drawing more juice to try to pull. And that's the stuff you learn from many, many years of being around a lot of guys. I was very fortunate to have the right tournament partners in
Yeah.
life. Yep.
Yeah. And
And
not only that too, but it doesn't only might eventually affect you or your equipment, but it affects the outdoors, the nature in general. Because what happens is, uh, birds, for example, that hang around the lake, hang
they
around the
get
water,
killed.
they'll actually pick that line up to go build their nest with it. Once they do that, they can very easily get tangled up in it
The babies lose their
when
feet.
they take and go build their nest, or their babies, if they do get it where they actually build the nest where
Yeah,
they don't get tangled up, then once the babies hatch, then their babies will get tangled up and it can't get out of it.
that's the
So
truth.
it's not good for the environment for and line, especially braided line, it doesn't disintegrate over time. It's going to be there forever
No,
if nobody
it
picks it
does
up.
not. And
Yeah.
even though
So
the alligators are big, the braided line can literally cut off an alligator's foot. It can cut the tail off. I mean, that is an awesome line to do what we do with it and how we use it, but we have to use it respectfully for Mother Nature.
yeah, yeah,
And the other
exactly.
issue that I have with other anglers is the fact that I've been behind them and I've literally watched them sling worms in the water as they go. You know, worms no good, throw it in the water. Throw it in the water. Don't waste throwing plastics in the water when the worm breaks. Throw it in a cup, throw it in your cooler, in a bag, because the fish will eat those baits, and when they swell up inside the stomach, they can't pass them as good as you think they do. Yes, they
Yeah.
do pass baits. I've had them pass Zara spooks in my live well, Rapalas, other different little things, but all in all, the worms do swell. They'll get bigger and bigger. Take a Cinco and stick it in a pot in some water for days and watch the size of that Cinco, and you'll wonder why the supersized Cinco was invented. Because that's the size a regular, normal 5-inch Cinco will swell. It's the size of a big Cinco. So don't throw them in the water. It's not a
Yeah.
good thing.
Exactly, exactly. And John, uh, growing up, of course, uh, I have had a lot of mentors, over the years as an angler coming up, and you actually kind of introduced me to a lot of the guys I originally met at ICAST or walking ICAST floor. But as far as mentors in the sport, I could remember growing up as a kid, watching like Roland Martin, his television show, and then Shaw Grisby, one more cast with Shaw, and then Bill Dance. And but growing up as a kid, John, mentors. Did you have any mentors in the sport as you were growing up that you kind of looked up to and tried to gave you inspiration as far as to follow your dreams as a fisherman?
Well, yes, sir. Working out of Everglades Holiday Park, where I run the major guide business from Everglades Holiday Park, is the fact there was a man that owned it named Mitchell Bridges. His son is the owner of the park now, but Mitchell taught me how to use spoons, how to walk frogs, and how to work big worms. The other fellow was a guy named Blackie Hinkle. He used to own a tackle store down here named Hinkle's. And he was the one who gave me the first 12-inch paddle tail worms we ever used, and the molds. And the other man was a name named Jim Coleman. Now, all these men have been deceased, but they were the men who showed me the bigger worms and how to work these things. And Mr. Bergeron, who we all know, Mr. Ron Bergeron, used to teach us how to throw frogs in the old days also as kids. When you'd run into him, he was a very kind guy. But my biggest mentor in life to watch at the times were the celebrities on TV that we knew. Back then we had Jimmy Rogers, John Fox Outdoors, and of course you can't ever forget Flip Palace. Flip Palace ran Walker's Cay. But my biggest influence were Roland Martin, Jimmy Houston, Bill Dance. Those were the three main guys. I would say without those three guys on TV every day, I don't think half of us would become who we are today.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's most people think they see Bill Dance. The first thing they think of though is his bloopers, but and which
Yeah.
we've been around. Norman and I've been different places, and Bill Dance's name will come up, and which I've met Bill Dance being from Tennessee and stuff like that my whole life. I mean, I've ran into Bill Dance probably about 4 or 5 times, uh, and so, but they're like, well, that's just all add on. I mean, he does that. It's all scripted out that he does all that stuff, and we're like, no,
None of it.
that's just Bill being Bill. So he, but I mean, but the, if you didn't have Bill Dance, Jimmy Houston, and Roland, um, they really kind of they opened up, especially more or less like the tournament aspect of it onto a broader scale. Um, to which I mean, uh, oh shoot, I just drew a blank. The guy that started the Bassmasters. Oh
Talking about
shoot,
Ray Scott?
Ray Scott.
Ray
I knew his
Scott,
last name was Scott. Um,
Ray Scott.
but I mean, besides like him putting the pieces to where, I mean, he done a phenomenal job because professional fishermen would not be what it is if it wasn't for Ray Scott. But he knew that those pieces with the Roland and Jimmy and Bill, that it formed professional fishermen into what it is today.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, you
So-
know it today.
They put all that together with all those anglers, and a lot of people don't realize how much Bill Dance's influence was with Bass Pro Shop itself.
Yeah,
Is Bill at one time was part of the whole organization, who was part of owning some of this, and he gave up his moments of doing the boat dealerships and all, so he could jump in with this tournament series with Ray Scott and Jimmy and all the others. But don't forget the Murray brothers, Billy and Bobby Murray. They were the ones that won the first BASS, and a lot of other guys followed. But those were very unique individuals because those men had to do everything on that boat blind. In other words,
Yeah.
there was no sonars, there was no depth finders, there was no way to see if there was any rocks or anything other than what we used to call line counting. How deep are we?
Yeah.
And you counted off your lines. That's some of the stuff that those men did on TV. Back then, you were only on once a week. And then when the Bassmasters magazines hit out, we all had to have that. The In Fisherman and all these other magazines we all had, which was our pretty much our Bible to us as fishermen. Because here was pictures of things we didn't see growing up in our neighborhoods. Here's, as I called it, the candy store books. And us guys that loved fishing so much were now put into the situation. And where Norman knows, going into meeting Norman down the road again and getting with it to go to the ICAST with Tuscarora and Worm Label was come up from a guy named Earl Carswell and Jack Huggins. And that was an idea that they decided to start trying to make baits for everybody to use that could catch fish when they use it. And those are people you meet through the field, such as meeting Homer Circle, Glenn Lau, being friends with Doug Hannon, the bass professor. People forget about Doug Hannon. He was an inventor. He invented things for the industry. Look him up, young kids, you'll know. But there's a lot of guys out there that have furthered the sport with their youth. These kids today can read transducers and graphs. These boys are smart. And us old timers are having to learn it, and I'm completely out of it now. Them boys are too smart for me. And you know,
No,
I
and
got
which we talked about it here a second or before we came on live, and Norman and I have talked about it. Um, what do you think if they had a tournament, even like a tournament series or just a single tournament that that just had uh, that just had the people use like an old flasher and to where I mean maybe like a flasher and maybe like the maps, you know, I mean, but if it did not have that with it was no live scope, no side scan, uh, no 360 or anything like that. If it was just strictly you just had a flasher and maps
and
to
a
where,
topographical map
yeah,
and a flasher,
yeah.
and
What do you
just hit
think?
the lake.
How do you think that would go as a tournament wise? Do you think that there'd be people that would be willing to jump aboard on that to go back? I mean, pretty much back to your roots on being in a boat, trying to figure out finding fish. Uh, maybe, I mean, even with no wave points, so then they had to go back to triangling everything in.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Don?
I think it'd be a neat thing called the blind eye tournament, the old
Yeah,
versus the young. Let's see if Hank Parker will come out of retirement, getting up with Jimmy and Bill and Roland. Those are the old school guys who had to do it without anything other than, let's see if there's a fish here. Let's see if there's one over here. We don't
yeah.
know until we just play the game.
Go out there.
That means
Yeah,
fish. That's what a lot of
yeah,
guys have asked me in the past when I used to do a lot of it. Now they're retired. The thing is how do you know where to go? You don't. You have to put time on the water. And if you
Yeah.
don't put
yeah,
time on the water, you're not going to win a lot. The motto is he who's on the water the most wins the most.
Yeah. And
yeah.
you
One
know,
who networks himself enough has enough crew behind him to help him get to that network to the next level. It
yeah,
all depends on the people you have around you and what your own self,
yeah.
worth is to yourself to figure it all out.
And you know, when
And
live scope and forward facing sonar and all those that new technology all came out, or everybody was starting to use it, it just took everything to a whole the next level. Because you're actually able to go down a bank now, and where back in the day, without the forward facing sonar, without the live scope and all that on the front of your boat, where you're actually looking at it, I mean, you basically go down a bank, fishing the bank. You be fishing the
yep,
shoreline. But how many of
sure.
those people, or those guys now that's using live scope, forward facing sonar, all that technology, we're actually seeing fish that is, as you're going down the bank, that's on the other side of your boat, that
And
is straight out
suspending.
in front of you, that
Yep.
you would never target
Yeah,
in the past because you're basically
Yeah.
fishing what you could see
yeah,
when you're fishing a bank. Now it's just taking it all to a next level, because you're actually and you're seeing fish that's actually 30 foot off the bank just cruising around, that now you could target, and for the most part you could catch them.
yeah,
Where with that, before all that technology came along, I mean, that was fish that would never be thrown at, would never be caught.
yeah. Now, what
Yep.
about? I mean, we've seen it also to where, like, we've been in the boat and we've had a boat come up. I mean, maybe not on the same side, but come hit the other side, come up to a dock, put the trolling motor in the water, scan up underneath the dock, pick the trolling motor back up, and head out.
Yeah.
And back, I mean, we didn't have that even
Yeah, back
5 years ago.
back in the day,
Back
you'd
then it
spend
was called
20 minutes
trial and
fishing
error.
the dock when there was nothing under it, just to see if there was a fish under it.
Yeah,
Where now,
Yep.
like Colin says, you can pull up to a dock, drop your trolling motor in, take about 2 minutes to scan the whole area under the dock, see if there's nothing there by looking under the dock with your electronics, and then pick the trolling motor
True.
up and move on to the next dock. Versus back in the day, you'd spend 20 minutes fishing that dock just to see if there was fish there. Then now it takes you 2 minutes to see if there's anything there. You don't even have to wet a line.
no. So it's
Well, that
just,
sure is.
it's crazy.
It's what you call a really great invention towards the sport. But it would be fun to see a thing with, like they have the MLF and all this other stuff they've got. Now they got the three boats against the three boats and the three boats, and they all talk together now, which is really cool. But I would be interested in seeing the old guys versus the young without
Yeah,
graphs. Let's
in
see what
something like
knowledge.
that, in something as the aspect of to where you're going back to the roots. I mean, because just like what you're saying is the technology now has gotten to where like it has out. I don't want to say outshine the older, but it took their knowledge and really kind of pushed it to the side to where if somebody knows how to read a graph on the live scope or side imaging or the down scan and stuff like that, if they can read it and know what they're looking at, um, then it has. I mean, that puts them above. Uh,
They have the advantage.
Yeah,
exactly. So I mean,
They have the
if there was a
advantage.
tournament series that they had to where maybe that all right, you can only have a flasher or
yeah.
anything like that.
The only thing, even you don't have to pull your electronics off because that'd be too much time and trouble. But you're not allowed to turn any of your electronics on except for your regular sonar. I mean, you could use your regular sonar. You can't use any of the live scope, side imaging. Uh, you can't use your GPS. Just use your regular sonar. Just show bottom depth and topographical map, and just go
I
out and
think
just
it'd
hit
be
the lake.
fun.
Yeah, it would.
I mean,
That'd be a blast.
it would bring back the
But you know something. Me as an angler today, and I could see where we as anglers, we and sometimes we rely today too much
yeah.
on all that technology, and to the point where we're kind of spoiled with it. And I've said this on camera before that I mean, there's been times where my sonar has been down where I'm having to uh, do something to it to repair, whether it be electrical or trans. There's something not working right with my sonar, and I'm like that. That's the decision maker whether I go to the lake or not, because my sonar's not or my electronics wasn't working properly. I stayed home.
Yeah. But how many
You
times
know, and
though?
that right there is just showing
Yeah.
today's anglers, and I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Nah.
It just spoils us so bad because we're so used to that today.
Yeah.
Well,
And
it's nice to
what do
be
you think?
spoiled, man.
What do you think is because it's fishing is just going to just keep growing. Um, as in
Well,
maybe I mean, what do you think? Because we're seeing more, especially since uh, I don't really want to say since everybody got the pandemic and stuff. I guess that's the easiest way to say it because we said the c word, then everything kind of hates the c word, so we kind of got to watch what's
yeah,
saying that.
so
But ever since then, I mean, fishing has just exploded. But what do you see as in the future of fishing to maybe like how do you see that it's going, and maybe how do you see that we can help fishing out to be able to keep our reservoirs, our river systems, and our lakes and stuff like that to where they're just going to keep on growing for our grandkids and so on below. What do you think that we can do as anglers ourselves to help with the growth of fishing and to have to where we still have good fisheries in the future?
well, that comes back to teaching tomorrow's children what we need to teach tomorrow's children. That is what is proper for the future, for the water system, the ecosystem altogether, and how much fishery we're going to keep. If like when they came out with catch and release, a lot of people were upset about it. I've been releasing them for a long time. We've eaten them in the past, but
Yeah.
largemouth bass really doesn't taste as well as you think.
No,
But
no.
all
Crappie
in
is the
all,
best way.
to do what they need to do for the future is to stay on top of controlled sprayings, how much volume of sprayings are allowed to get away with during the years, and learning how to pick the weeds up a little more natural and to help out the fishery to where the weeds are what belong there, the natural resources that belong there. Also with our manatees. The poor manatees need food. And if they kill off all the grass that the manatees are eating, we're going to lose more manatees than they've ever done. We just witnessed it too. All right, doesn't have a lot to do with this or that or this. It has to do a lot to do with pollution and water movement. And what's going to happen is we can't control. Mother Nature's been here for billions of years. We're just a speck of sand sitting in it. So whatever she's going to do, she's going to do, but we can help out by not polluting it as much as they do, which that's why they came out with the four-stroke engines over dumping fuel into the water from the two-stroke engines, from the oil residues. That was the other reason for the EPA systems, which is okay. But, you know, we've got a lot to do, and the kids of tomorrow have a lot to fight for, and that's the clean water bills. So you have something to drink. In the state of Florida, our water levels are low. Our aquifers are low. We don't have a deep mountain in Florida. It's not, 150 feet of water around us and 200 feet lakes. We're a shallow state. So the more that comes through, the more goes into our aquifer of our drinking waters in South Florida. So we have to stay on top of the issue of how much is being done. Now, the organizations in Lake Okeechobee through Roland Martins, through Mary Ann's and Raymond Iglesias and Scott Martin and other people up there at Lake Okeechobee are going to these management meetings. They are asking for help. But for the future, we have to keep water clean, because without water, folks, we don't live. Neither do the fish. Nothing lives without water. So we have to clean the water. And weeds, filters, is God's natural filter in the waters to clean these waters. But when you're dumping poisons and spraying everything on them, it's going to hurt the flow of
I was
the
going to
system.
say too, John. If you think about it too, if you fish or you're from South Florida, you know a lot about South Florida fishing, or you live down there and fish the Florida lakes. Anytime you're fishing around hydrilla, okay, hydrilla is one of the best natural filtration systems that you'll find in a lake.
Mother Nature's sponge.
If you actually pick up a strand of hydrilla, is first of all, a good piece of hydrilla is going to be nice, green, and crisp, just like a crisp piece of lettuce you buy in the supermarket. It's going to be nice and fresh. But on the end of each of the I don't know what they're called, they're not really leaves, but the tentacles that come off the hydrilla, where you got the main sprout in the middle, you're going to see little black particles on the hydrilla itself. And that is actually what it's picking up from the lake. So anytime you pick up a piece of hydrilla, you're going to see little black particles on the end of it, every tentacle or whatever it's called that come off the hydrilla. That's actually what that piece of hydrilla is filtering out of the water.
Yep.
And when you're fishing, if you're fishing in an area that has hydrilla, look at the water clarity.
Oh, it's going to be
The
a lot
water
clearer.
clarity is going to be crystal clear. Anytime you're fishing around amongst hydrilla, where if you're fishing where there's not a lot of hydrilla, or there used to be hydrilla and there's no hydrilla there anymore due to certain circumstances, you're going to see how dirty the water is. The water is going to be dirty. It's going to be muddy. It's going to be silty. But again, when you have that hydrilla, and hydrilla is not the only aquatic vegetation that actually acts as a filtration system, but that hydrilla is needed, if nothing else, for better oxygen in the water for the fish, especially in the shallower lakes that you have in South Florida. Because the shallower lakes, it warms a lot quicker, especially in the summertime. And
Yes.
and them fish need sanctuary to get down in, because you're always going to find a little bit cooler water where you have hydrilla. It blocks out a lot of the natural sunlight that penetrates the water, so the fish could get under it as sanctuaries, as ambush point sanctuary. So it all kind of works in conjunction. But the main thing is it gives the water filtration, And if you find an area that you don't have any hydrilla, chances are that the water is going to be dirtier, it's going to be darker, it's going to be muddier, versus where you're going to find hydrilla.
Right. And
Yeah.
we got a couple comments here, John. Um, one, Travis says that use the old old baits, melt them down, and to make new uh, soft plastics is what he does. Instead of throwing them into the water, he takes
Yes.
them and melts them
Yes.
down and makes new plastics out of them. But he
Recycling
also
at its
said that
finest.
um, he remembers when he was a young kid that Poga was full of hydrilla. Now it's totally gone. He's talking about uh, which John and Norman knows when that somebody says Poga what they mean. For people that's not down in Florida, that he means Escapoga.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
which
They're
we
catching fish there now, though. They're catching fish now.
yeah, that's what he said earlier in an earlier comment that it is on fire. So,
Yeah.
um,
It's starting to come back good. Again, I was just down there a couple weeks ago. I was guiding for 2.5 weeks down there, and I think I had five five trips on Estapoga, and I'm very pleased to say that it seems like Estapoga is on its way back. They are catching them down there now. They're catching them good. They're catching them strong. Uh, hopefully it's on an upswing to stay. But back to Travis's point, as far as back in the day when Estapoga had hydrilla, before all the politics started happening with the lakes and the aquatic weed control, Estapoga was, if you fished I don't want to necessarily say the club tournaments, because a lot of the club tournaments didn't quite have the sticks that your trails, like your extreme trail. And was another couple trails that actually had some of the biggest sticks around the state fishing. And back in the day, if you didn't have 30 plus pounds, you were fighting for 10th place. Basically, the top three, top four, top five places was going to be 31 or over, because the lake wasn't messed with. They let it naturally take its course, and then when all this stuff started with the politics happening with the lake and with all the aquatic weed control, as the locals down there know it as today, it started diminishing what the lakes were, and it started on the downward swing. Again, it all has to do with putting poison into the lakes, killing the
Yeah.
weeds. But it doesn't. You're not only killing the weeds, you're affecting every. Not only fish, you're affecting wildlife in general, whether
The,
it be
the
birds,
entire
no matter
ecosystem.
what has anything to do with the lake when it comes to nature.
Yeah.
Animals, you're affecting, not necessarily only fish. But yeah, back in the day, if you didn't have 30 over 30 pounds, you weren't in the top 7 or 8 back
That's
then.
true.
right,
And now I'm really happy to see where it's actually starting to come back, where you're actually starting to see those same anglers, the same sticks fishing these trails. That's actually
Yep.
starting to push in the 25, 26 pound bags to win tournaments again down there.
Yep.
So
Now see,
that's very pleased to see that.
yeah. And
but
got a question for you, John. My dad had asked, has John noticed a big difference in the fisheries with the great increase of the population uh, for Florida? I guess with more traffic on the the lake and stuff like that. Have you noticed? Are
yeah,
the
a little
lakes
bit
being able to
more,
hold it up?
a little bit more traffic, more boat traffic, more or less spots to pick that you would have to yourself. The other thing is back to tournament fishing also, is the guys who were winning, and I'll have to say this straight out, is when I first started out, I was learning from older men telling me things. But getting into tournaments, I started with a fellow named Doug Harris, and we won our share of tournaments, back to back to back. We ran all the way, and we went going our different ways, as most partners do in life. You're still friends. And then, you pick up another guy. I fished with an attorney named Bruce Greer. Turned out to be a very good fisherman, learned. And then my other partner now that I've been fishing with for 25 years is JP McKay. And they call him the Bass Whisperer on the internet for fishing and guide business down here in South Florida. But then I fished with Mark Escobar, also for a year or two, or three in and out, who owns BJ's Bait and Tackle in Plantation, Florida. They also have the bruiser bait lines, the big worms, anything you want in there. But the motto is what I'm trying to get to is pick your partners well, keep that partner for a long time, especially when you're gelling. If you have to go to a new partner, make sure you're picking a guy that you can still gel with, who's going to continue to pull the load when you're not pulling the load. That's how you find good partners. One guy gets a hot hand, the other guy's slow, you let him go. Those are rituals that you have to become friends in a tournament. Once you get in that boat and you become a team, you're fishing for money. Now it's you against the world. There is no friendships on the water. We all know that as tournament anglers. But I can say this with faith. When there is a situation, an angler breaks down, something goes wrong, every man on that water becomes his brother. That's the truth.
Yeah.
One man gets hurt, we all feel it. So, from an old guy to the young ones, keep up the faith, keep yourselves going, and take care of one another. But remember, win.
Yeah, and
Bad
getting
when
back
you
to
lose.
that point,
We all
getting back to
lose.
that point, John, that's one of the really cool things about being a fisherman and a tournament angler is where you don't see that a lot with other sports. Where fishing,
Oh no.
whether you fish against someone, with them, in the same trail they're fishing, whether it's the top level tournaments or just your regular club tournaments, fishing is a big fraternity,
Yeah.
and everybody as an angler, when you come off the water, we're all friends. And we're all there to have each other's back. Whether you're fishing against them hard for first place in a tournament, and you don't see that a lot in other sports where you have basically a big fraternity or a brethren, which is made up of your fellow tournament anglers and fishermen, where everybody out there has each other's back. Anytime somebody needs help or needs assistance, which you just don't see that a lot in other sports like you do in fishing. And that's one of the really cool things about being an angler and a fisherman is you have that family camaraderie between everybody, whether you know them or you don't know them. You meet them for the first time, or you know the guy for 20 years and been fishing against him. You all share kind of a brethren or like you're a big part of the fishing fraternity.
Yeah.
And you just don't get that in a lot of other sports out there.
We got
It's very true. I mean, in this
We
sport
got-
right now, in fishing, look around you. You got big people, you got small people, you got any language, any color, any nationality from around the world is in fishing. Look at it. Just
Yeah.
look at it.
and
They're
that's
here.
like
Africa, Italian, this person, that person. They're all in neutral. Fishing is a world sport for everybody.
Yeah.
Don't have to be a
that's
football
like
player.
it's kind of funny that you say that because we just got a comment from New England Bass Trackers. Um, I mean, who would have ever thought that? And he just says, "Hi, gentlemen. God bless. Glad to tune in to the broadcast." So, one, we appreciate you tuning
Yes,
in.
thank you.
But I mean, again, like John, we got like multiple times. We've had somebody from Puerto Rico. We've had somebody from Switzerland tuning in to our podcast, and it's phenomenal that that they're tuning in to listen to kind of what's going on I mean, they're not even in country and they're tuning in. But even like with the New England bass trackers, uh, they've got uh, they've got bass there. But I mean, other countries, I mean, like Australia and stuff, they don't have the bass that we have, or even in Japan. And it's amazing to see like how the in professional fishermen how the the foreign guys with has transitioned to from fishing over wherever they may be from, has transitioned to bass fishing over here if it's largemouth or even smallmouth. I mean, they and it shows that it is a big community of how much support and stuff that people, um, that it is around the world just in the fishing industry.
And a lot of the guys too. Of course, I've known Takahiro Mori for about 10 years now, and just use his name for example. When he first came to the United States with the dream of being a United States professional bass fisherman, first of all, he came with not a cent in his pocket.
Yeah.
He didn't have a dime to his name. He came over, and at that time, he did not speak a word of English. He couldn't communicate, and he didn't have any money. And to see where he is today, Bassmaster Classic champion. Um, and now, if you were to meet him at one of the shows or just run into him, you could pretty much carry on a fluid conversation with him. And that just goes to show, like some of them guys, how dedicated they are to our sport of fishing, to come to a completely different country, not speaking a word of English, not having a dime to their name. All they had is a dream of what they wanted to become as a fisherman, and knew they were going to have to come to the States to live out that dream. They wouldn't be able to live that dream in Japan, for example, to be what they wanted to become. And it just goes to
Right.
show what dedication they have to be able to do that. Not only, could you imagine going to a foreign country as Americans and to live for 5 or 6 years and not be able to speak the language,
Yeah.
or go without a dime to your name? Even what are you going to do to survive? When you get over there, and those guys, a lot of those guys do that, and in the long run they thrive and flourish with what they've done. And even like talk, I mean, you could actually sit down and carry on a fluid conversation in English with him today, and
Yep.
10 years ago he didn't know a word of
He
English.
couldn't. He couldn't even
But
say except
that's
a
one of the things
hello.
with people like that. They come over, and the first thing they do is they want to learn our language. They want to be able to talk and carry on a conversation in English. And that just goes to show, not only as fishermen, but what kind of people and a person they are, to be able to do that, and then become as big as they are today.
Yep. That's what you call. That's why they call it the American dream for some people, because they can actually figure out how it's done, and they do it by what? Hard work.
Yep, exactly,
Like
exactly,
Takamori, what did he say to us one day? He said, "Nobody gave me anything. I had to earn it."
exactly.
That's how
Hey,
you get it
John,
in America.
real quick, I want to let's talk a little bit about the storyline about that fish that's sitting behind you. Uh,
Uh-oh.
I keep staring at that fish back there. I know a little bit of the story, but let's tell some of our viewers a little bit of the story. It's 13 plus, and I'll let you carry on from there. Give us a little bit of a backstory on that fish.
Well, many, many, many years ago with that particular fish, I was actually fishing out of a canoe. And Doug Harris was in front of me with another fellow named John Landry. And I can't remember Tom's last name, but we were all together around each other. And we were catching some big fish that month off this side of the fingers, known off the fingers underneath the high wires that you saw, Norman, with all the electrical wires. And right across from Sawgrass Fish Camp where the canal goes north and south. They used to be overhung trees in the old days and stick ups and beautiful grass and everything around it. And Doug had just came through there about 10 minutes before me and had a big explosion, but he didn't get a hookup. So I had just got done boating a 9.5 pounder in the boat, which at that moment I was fishing for mounts to put in the tackle store. Back then was called Bassman's Bait and Tackle. So I went out to prove that I could get some big fish in a hurry and put in the stores. This particular fish, I was using a buzz bait, which was Uncle Homer's buzz bait back then, which was a double jointed. It would move. Uncle Josh or Uncle Joe, I can't remember the name now. But I made a throw over and it had Lexan plastic blades. They weren't metal, they were plastic. When I threw it, it skipped off the water past one piece of stick and it landed up right at the edge of the rock. When I lifted it and brought it past that stick, the whole stick broke. The place lit up like nothing. And next thing I remembered was the fish was laying on the bank, flopping with my lure in its mouth. It hit so hard, it beached itself. So I stood up in the canoe and I lifted it back into the water and I fought it. And everybody thought I was going to lose it. Plus, I was using an old 1964 Mitchell 300. That's how it made a noise with an old hurricane yellow whoopee stick. And you talking about getting beat up. That fish whooped on me for a while. But I landed her, got her on the wall. That particular week, I caught two more in between 11 and 12 pounds off that same little area in the same couple of weeks. Back then, we could see fish, we could catch fish, big ones everywhere. Long story short, we were in the flats one year, Doug and I were. Thought I had a mudfish. Swim up, hit this big worm, started swimming off with it. Doug says, oh, it's a mudfish, it's a mudfish. I tried to shake it off until it jumped. It was a 9 pound bass. We caught it, got it to the boat, and we both said to each other at that moment, from now on, we never yell, it's a mudfish. From now on, we don't care what it is until we catch it.
Yep,
Then we
yeah,
can identify it.
yeah. We the same thing with
Fish.
yeah, same thing like with a big fish up here when we're fishing for smallmouth. Um, typically you hook a smallmouth, you can pretty much tell if it's a big smallmouth. They're just the way their head shakes. Typically, they're going to start coming up. But a couple times, I think the dad Colin had one on. He ended up catching it. I think we're in my boat, all three of us, and he ended up catching it. It was like a 4.5 pound smallmouth, but the fish actually stayed down and didn't act like a smallmouth. And the first thing your dad says is, "Oh, I don't think it's a smallmouth."
We thought it was a drum.
Yeah, we were thinking it was a drum. And then he started getting a little bit melancholy with the fight. And next thing you know, we see this smallmouth come up. We're like, it's a smallmouth, dude. It's a smallmouth. Start fighting it again. But yeah, until you see the fish, I don't care what it is. You never want to take for granted that it's not what you're trying to catch, because we've seen that before, and bite you in the butt one day if you're not careful. You break off a fish once you see it, and like, oh man, I should have let that fish have some line instead of trying to horse it to get it out of the water and get my bait back into the water quicker. But yeah, but hey, if we were to go down to the Everglades right now, this time of the year, late March, what are we going to be throwing down there to catch some big bass?
Well, that's a good question. We just had some cold fronts come through, so it's going to shut them down.
Before you say anything, I'm going to tell you, I love every time I've been down there, and then me and Colin was down there last year after we got done with ICAST. We're going back this year. You'd be hard pressed to take that topwater Zara spook out of my hand. I think last year when we were down there, I don't think I put the darn topwater bait on, but different time of the year. That's in mid-July. Right now, this time of the year, what would you be throwing?
Well, mostly some crankbaits, suspending baits, you know, off the ledges at the moment since they're coming off bed somewhat here and there, and they're going to be feeding up. So they're going to be looking for feeding fish, and right now we got the water moving. Just had some cold fronts come through, but the fishing's been very, very good. All the guides down here have been producing, and we got a majority of like peacock bass, the ferocious Oscars. If anybody's never caught an Oscar or ate an Oscar, they're pretty darn good fish. But for the fight, pound for pound, they are your most vicious fish in the water, down here. But your largemouth and all that, they're all out here, and it's up to the fish to tell you what they're going to do. I prefer to like to do crankbaits and suspending baits sometimes in the winter, and super flukes, believe it or not. Super
Super
flukes do
flakes.
good in the winter.
Yeah. As far as a
And
crankbait, are you throwing more square bill, something that dives a little bit shallower, or are you coming off a little bit deeper, coming off deeper drops, or off the
well, when
edges,
I
or
when I was fishing full time, I like to use a lot of Bagley brims. You know the Bagley brim?
yeah,
Yeah.
They're made of balsa, and you can't forget the shad wraps, the bigger shad wraps, stuff like that. The old famous silver and black or gray and black rapalas, the orange, the gold and black rapalas. And up there at Istapoga and places like Kissimmee, the blue and white rapalas work also. People don't remember that, and a lot of crawdads, playing around with crawdads on the bottom and pulling them on the bottom through the grass and through the rocks because they'll get down on the bottom during the colder weather, and that's where the fish are going to find them. And if you're seeking into it, and the fish aren't biting anywhere, they're usually probably going to be what we call tight-lipped, you know, lockjaw. Means go
yeah,
home, put the boat on the trailer, because they're just not
yeah,
going to bite. I don't care what you're doing. And sometimes if you do catch one fish, it's probably going to be a big one. I mean, that's
yeah.
the biggest thing. And
Go
most
after
of
that
our,
reaction bite, though, right? With this time of the
yeah,
year, when they don't want to, when they're not eating to eat, they're eating to react. If you throw something by them that has enough erratic motion to it, or like a crankbait that's going to go by them a little bit more quicker than say trying to finesse something by them, get
yeah,
more of
that's
that
why the
reaction
suspension
bait when
baits
they
work
don't want to
great.
really eat, but they will react to it because that's what they do.
Yeah, that's why I like and if I have to go up and fish northern waters and stuff, suspension baits work great because
Yeah,
they'll hold their position.
Yeah.
And, that's why you
Well,
see a lot of the
Kevin,
pros
yeah,
on TV with Kevin Van Dam, Ike
Kevin
Elliott,
Van Dam made
Hackney
that jerk bait. He proved that you can fish that jerk bait all year round,
all year round.
and it wasn't up until what till like the uh, where they started doing like the Bass Live to where was it 4 or 5 years ago, anglers were trying to hide the bait that they were using, and they could because the Bass Live was not on their boat. They didn't have that camera in the
Right.
boat, so they could hide the bait. But now, since the Bass Live, there's not hiding anything on that boat now, and so people have realized, especially within the past 5 years or so, that that jerk bait is an all year round bait instead of, and that's like with and I try telling people the same thing like with the blade baits. People think that the blade baits is just a wintertime bait, and I fish that thing all year round. I changed my retrieve up on the blade bait, but it is a all year round, and you can catch tanks on that, the jerk bait and the blade bait, um, all year round when it's not what they say the perfect time to be throwing it. It's all year round bait.
yeah.
We got New England uh, bass trackers says that he actually loves a jerk bait for pike and pickerel up in he's in Massachusetts. So that's pretty
Universal
cool.
bait.
So
It'll work
but
anywhere.
do what?
It'll work anywhere in the world, them
Yeah.
jerk
Yeah,
baits. In the
yeah, well,
ocean, they catch them in the ocean. Even in big worms we make, you can catch plenty of cobia on the bigger worms. It's
yeah.
funny, but they love black and they love brown. and them
Yeah.
cobia will
Well,
go on them big
there.
worms.
Yeah, I was gonna say there is actually. I know there's pictures out of it. I think some back when we were with Tuscarora Pro Lures, John. One of our one of our swim baits, called the tomahawk swim
Yeah,
bait. We had one that perfectly matched. If you remember this, perfectly matched dolphin colors. Do you remember that? But I think
yeah.
there's a story about somebody either caught it on video or had pictures of it where they were actually using that bait offshore and caught a billfish because
Sailfish, you
a
caught.
lot of billfish they feed
Yeah,
on small dolphin out
Oh, that's
when you're
cool.
trolling around for them. Well, I think there was either a picture and Earl Carswell, a buddy of ours, that actually was one of the co-owners along with Jack, the late great Jack Huggins, could probably elaborate on it more of its exact, accuracy of the story. But I believe that somebody actually caught a billfish on one of the tomahawk swim baits, the one that actually mimicked dolphin colors as well. So I don't know
yeah,
if you know a little bit about that story or not, John.
yeah. He caught a sailfish on it, videoed it, took it out of the mouth right there at the boat, and that's a pretty good thing to find out that your little fish that you play around with, when they came out with it, Earl and Jack went up and found it and come up with it and come into it and brought me in the team to verify the colors and what we were doing and how much hardeners and how much salt was to be used. And the bait really works great. The 14-pound, 2-ounce fish that I had caught was caught on the sunburst tomahawk. That's what I caught that fish on.
Pretty cool story.
Well,
And I've run out of
not
them, and since Earl's retired, and all of them we've retired pretty much the stuff, I don't have any of that stuff in stock anymore. Norman, you know about all the stuff we had, but they were a very popular bait, and they flew off the shelf pretty quick, and we just don't have any left. And since we're not doing them anymore, oh, I got a cramp. Long
well,
got a cramp. Ow.
well, I,
Another sign of old age, That's how it goes. But
yeah,
as involved as any of that, those baits were a swim bait, which was good. And the big 16-inch worms we used to make, they catch all sorts of fish, catfish. Guy showed me catching groupers with them, big groupers. And so, any of them big worms, people ask me all the time, why would you use such a big worm? Is it a snake? Well, yeah, they can be used as a snake, but that's not why they were invented. Big worms pretty much were invented because when the water currents are moving, what's in the water in the mud, Norman? Eels.
Yeah.
Nothing
Eels.
but eels. And how
Yeah.
big are the
Especially in
eels?
South Florida, eels is one of the biggest forages for largemouth bass,
Yep.
yeah.
especially in the Everglades.
So,
At one time, we used to buy live eels from a guy who used to catch live eels 12 inches long. We used to buy eels to use them for fishing, and they would catch bass. But
yeah,
that's why the big worms down here work so well, and because of the eels population that we have in the mud.
Yeah.
So those are why the big worms are there.
Yeah.
But
That's
you
some
can't beat
good
them when
stuff,
they're
John.
on, huh?
So that's some pretty good stuff right there.
Well, a lot of people, you gotta, like we talked about earlier, matching the hatch. You just said that there was frogs on Istapoga. The guy said that. Well, it's a hatch time. Now, another friend said he was at his boat at Holiday Park, and he called me and he says, "Hey, dude, I got all these lime green frogs in my airboat. They're all over the place." Well, what does that tell you? What color frog you want to start throwing?
yeah.
A
Lime
lime
green.
chartreuse green frog. And
Yeah,
everybody asked me, what is my favorite frogs in life that I used to use a lot of? Is a scum frog. The basic first floating frog, scum frog, is still one of the top of the line frogs. Yes, I love Spro, and we love this one, and we love that one. But that frog there still has the right softness to it, that it still does what I call a pretty much good hookup, and you don't miss very many fish on them. And
Yeah.
they match the hatch with their colors. And they just came out with a new one, which is sponsored with JT Kenny. and JT Kinney is sponsored with them, so he's been showing the brand new colors that they've come out with, and they're coming out with some pretty exotic looking colors. So don't give up on the old school baits yet. I've always said that because I still fish with the old 1950s jitterbugs, the old devil horses, and the hula popper.
Yeah.
Can't beat
And
them. Why are they still making them if they didn't work?
yeah. So John,
So,
not to cut you off or anything like that and cut you short, but we've been on here for about an hour and or over an hour and 15 minutes, and I've got to get some sleep so I can go to work, and then it's my last day this week to work before Norman and I head out to the classic. So. But
well, I appreciated it having me on. I enjoyed myself, and just remember, you
we
know,
thoroughly enjoyed. We're going to
It
have to
was a
have you
good
on
time.
again,
Good
John,
time.
no, I
to where we can
appreciate it.
go into more details about fishing down there, and then Norman and
There's
I need
so
to get
much.
down there to where we can get you on the boat, and we'll go and catch what was it the what is it chinchilla? What was those fish?
Oscars?
Oscars. We need to go
Yeah.
down
Oh,
there
the
and catch some
Oscars. Yeah,
Oscars. I've
get
never
to see
caught
those
any,
things. Oh, yeah,
and
lots
so.
of them.
But with
It's a
that being
great guide
said,
fish.
John, we're going to we really deeply appreciate you coming on
Yeah.
and sharing your time with us and sharing some knowledge with us. Um, let's see. Uh, the New England Bass Trackers guy said, "Interesting facts. My state record largemouth is 15.8. Was actually
Nice,
caught in winter ice in December. That is crazy.
nice.
Wow.
Can you
Yeah,
imagine
Wow.
pulling
that
that
is
thing out of
crazy. That
You
out
is
of out of a hole?
better get
that's
a bigger
crazy.
auger to get that thing through the hole.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
you
You
need
know,
a
that's
bigger
something.
hole for sure.
Congratulations.
That's insane.
Congratulations on your catch. You know, before we hang up, guys, I'd like to say, thank God for America,
Yes.
and thank God for giving us everything that we have, and the Lord Jesus for sacrificing himself for all of our sins in this world. And just
Yep,
remember, we are called fishermen, but God calls all of us fishers of
yep,
men.
Yeah.
yep,
Teach a man to fish, he can feed his family. That's the secret behind fishermen. Give them the faith of what the fishing's about, saving the lands, the water,
yep.
saving your families, being that person, and praising the Lord God and Jesus for giving you everything you've got on the table. And thank you to the truck drivers and the farmers out there, and all you fishermen. Thank you guys for having me on, and God bless. Have a nice
John,
day.
thank you, brother. It's been
Yep.
fun, and we'll definitely do it again.
Yep, for
Yeah,
sure.
thank you so much.
And we're going to again, guys. That was the legendary king of the Everglades, John Pate, that was with us and today, and we thoroughly enjoyed chit chatting with him. But again, make sure you go to our YouTube channel, Deck Talk Podcast. Hit that like and subscribe button and the notification, because again, we're going to be strictly here pretty soon. It's going to be strictly straight. This podcast is going to be straight on to uh, that that channel. It's so we're wanting to move everybody from our Facebook over to that channel to be able to watch it there, to grow that channel. And like what we do normally, we do want to be able to help out other fishermen and stuff like that. So the New England Bass Trackers guys, they also have a YouTube channel. It is called New England Bass Trackers with a Z at the end of it. So make sure you go check out their channel and hit that subscribe button also. But Norman, let's real quick kind of tell them what we've got going on here this week. That is pretty big news for us.
All right, we are actually leaving Thursday morning for Knoxville. We are going to be at the Classic for 4 or 5 days. Um, Thursday, we're going to be leaving in the morning. We're actually going to be covering, as media, we're going to be covering the media day at the Classic. Um, we're also going to be broadcasting live from the Classic. We're going to do a special episode of the Deck podcast from the Classic as well. And we'll as it gets closer and we get a little bit more on the date and time that we're actually going to be going live with that, we'll send everybody some reminders and let you know. We'll let you know a little bit as it gets closer to then on what time and day we're actually going to be broadcast live right from the Classic.
Yeah.
And we have a couple killer guests coming on too for the first episode. We're definitely going to be doing one episode. We might do 2 or 3 depending on time wise. But we definitely have one special episode coming up at the Classic, and we got 2 really, really cool killer guests going to be on with us.
Why don't you just go on and break it out?
All right, we have Ray Ron Watt from Power Pole will be on our first episode live from the Classic, and we got a lot of great topics we're going to be discussing, including something brand new that has just recently been released by PowerPole. So you don't want to miss that episode. But we got a lot of other things to talk about that that PowerPole has going on right now as well. So, but yeah, don't miss it. Live from the Bassmaster Classic with Greg and Brian Watts with PowerPole. So it's a must-see episode.
Okay,
That'll be nice.
Yeah.
Hey, can we give a shout out to Dennis Crenshaw down in Placid?
Yeah, we're going to run. He's actually going to meet up with us during ICAST, John. He's going to be staying with us. He's going to actually, when we're there, he's going to be there. So the whole time that we're at ICAST this year, old Dennis is going to be down there with us. And John, we actually, when we leave ICAST, we're going to his house, hooking up the boat, and he's going to put us on some crappie. So we talked him into a fishing trip.
Well, I might have to come down up there for this one.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah,
come on. We're going to.
That's what he was telling me about. Okay, I understand now.
We're it's going to be Thursday. We're going to be Thursday afternoon. Is
next Thursday?
No, of ICAST. So,
you mean our ICAST in Orlando?
Yeah.
All right. See, I might go. I might go this year if my legs will hold up.
We'll holler at you as it gets closer to kind of let you know what the exact date and day and time.
It'll be the 13th of July when we're going to be going out on the water with them. But so yeah, if you can work it out, just come on up and catch some crappie with us. So
yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah,
that'd be fun.
We all love old Dennis.
On the ICAST, I mean, I might go. I haven't made. My wife asked me yesterday if I was still planning on going because I thought about going this year since I was doing a little better health wise.
Yeah.
But it all depends on how my legs are feeling. And good God Almighty, I don't want Greg Hackney to pick me up and carry me around the floor again. That was an embarrassment. But thank you for him for doing that. But if we can, if I get there, I get there. But yeah, it'd be nice to go fishing.
About how fishermen is a brotherhood, no matter what level you fish at, who you are. If you're a fisherman and you're a tournament actor, you're always there to help your brother fisherman, and that just goes to prove the point right there with Greg Hackney.
Yeah.
You had a little bit of a spell, and Greg basically pushed you around up to the medical booth.
Yeah, it was funny as heck. What did you tell me? Don't scare me like that again. Poor Norman. He was like this. Are you going to make it? Yeah, I'm going to make it. But thanks, guys, for having me on. I really enjoyed it. And the next time we do it, we can talk more about product and situations on the water maybe, and, more about cancer cover up with the long sleeves and wearing your sun protection, your buffs, because I'm a character of all the cuts and the stuff they've been doing to me now. So on the next one, we can talk about stuff like that too, probably.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
I know it's time to go, so thank you guys.
Thank you. And so again, guys, we want to thank you for sticking with us,
Thanks, John.
and thank you, John, for coming on. We deeply appreciate it and the time that you took to the chit chat with us. But again, guys, we want to say again, hit that like, subscribe, share this like crazy. Help us grow this. Norman and I are thoroughly enjoying doing all these the podcast. We're enjoying having our special guest. We're going to be having a blast here this weekend at the Classic. Don't be surprised if we just pop on, do a little podcast, and or even just do like a little live or something like that with somebody. I know we will be going live. We do have a gift for a fisherman uh, that is fishing in the Classic. That is a good buddy of ours. We had a buddy make something for us that we're going to that Norman and I were talking about. We had this a buddy of mine, Bruce Anderson with Deep South Vinyl. We had him make something for us to be able to give. So we're going to definitely do a live with that. So you don't want to miss that because I think everybody's going to get a laugh out of it, don't you?
Exactly.
But we do want to say thanks again. And we hope to see you out on the water. God bless and live the passion, brother.
Tight lines, guys.
Take care.